You're listening to The Breakfast Show on Faith FM with Skafy and Elliot, and we have producer Tish with us today. We are going to be talking about in this third hour of our strongholds in our relationship with God. But before we get there, we have some messages that we want to read. We have new quiz questions to play along. So stay tuned. We have a great show, great program ahead of us today. Let's start with a quiz question. So please, producer Tish, what is it that you can offer us?
All right, I have a new quiz question, and it is, what river stopped flowing when priests carrying the ark reached the water's edge?
Ooh.
What river stopped flowing when priests carrying the ark reached the water's edge? If you think you know the answer, please text in on 0491 064 669. We have two correct answers in our studio. I'll read it one more time. What river stopped flowing when priests carrying the ark reached the water's edge? 0491 064 669.
There you go. I was a little bit worried that
You're a bit
I was going to get
nervous.
that wrong, but thankfully
Congratulations.
I got it right. There you go. There you go. That was such an awesome story from Ben. I love that, the story of the sharks. I always find it fascinating when people have these really cool stories of times where they've done something that's kind of wild or exciting or whatever like that. I'm always all ears in those kind of moments. So that was a fantastic interview. I'm sure if you were listening that you enjoyed it as well. I want to get into a study here that I actually found really fascinating and interesting when I was preparing for it, because I learned that I am actually guilty of a lot of these things that I was reading about.
Okay.
Which is
So
kind of
let's
funny.
get into the guilt session here. You're going to take us on a guilt trip, my friend Elliot, today. Is a good guilt or a bad guilt?
It's good guilt.
Okay.
But the topic of the Bible
It's
study,
awareness.
Awareness.
Yeah.
That's a better way.
Yeah.
of
Awareness,
putting
and
it.
we can decide to do something about it.
But
That's what guilt is.
the topic of the Bible study is the strongholds in our relationship with God, or in other words, like the things that are kind of inhibiting, the things that are restricting us from having a relationship with God, things that are holding us back. Because ultimately we want to have as close a relationship with God as we can. Like that's the end goal. And there are things that are going to stop us from doing that. And so let's have a look at what are some of those things, because it's important that we realize what they are,
okay.
so that we can try and avoid them, you know. There's a verse that I want to look at. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 12. And I'll just read it here. It says, Paul speaking, he says, "Therefore let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall." That's kind of interesting. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. If you think you're doing well, just be careful in case you fall. You know?
That's right. Look, if you think you're doing well in your relationship with God, hey, that's a great thing.
That is a great
That's
thing.
awesome. However, just make sure that you don't fall. Don't kind of take that for granted
Yeah,
and think that nothing can be, nothing can happen.
exactly. Exactly.
Don't take that for granted. Because if you're becoming like Samson, for example, and you say, me and God, we know we are like this. We are like, flesh and bone, and we're together. So there's nothing that can, that will make me get, separate me from Him.
Yeah.
But say, hey, just watch, because yes, you can fall. So hey, take care of your relationship with God.
Absolutely. And that's like what we were learning about yesterday with Samson. He was reliant on his own strength. And he's kind of like thinking, man, there's nothing that I can do that's going to have me separated from God. Like he kind of tests all the limits. He pushed all the boundaries as far as what God told him not to do. And then he did all those things. And then in the end, he was kind of like, it's, God will never leave me. I'm fine. I got my own strength to rely on and all this kind of stuff. And then God ends up leaving him. He loses his strength. And then he's like, okay, he's in a pickle, So what Paul is saying here is like, kind of don't be like Samson. Don't rely on your own strength. If you think you're doing well with your relationship with God, brilliant. That's good. But don't think, this is perfect. I'll never have any problems from here on. I can relax.
Nothing that I would ever do would change that situation.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not
exactly.
quite,
No.
That's not the case at all.
Yeah.
There's stuff that you can do that can make you fall from grace or fall from the relationship with God.
And that's the thing that I love about the Bible is that we can look at the examples of others and their pitfalls where they kind of went wrong, where they took the wrong steps. We can look at it and go, okay, let's learn not to do this. Like in the case of Samson, we can learn, okay, let's not trust in our own abilities, because if we do, it's pretty likely, in fact, it's very likely that we'll end up stumbling along the way somewhere. That's what we can learn from Samson, which I think is a really interesting and valuable lesson. But my question is, okay, what are the other things that might prevent us from growing closer to God? Like Samson was relying on his own strength. Okay, that's one thing. What are the other things? There's something that actually a really interesting passage in the Bible, and this is probably where we'll spend most of our time, is Matthew chapter 6. So Matthew chapter 6 and verse 2, actually, Jesus is speaking here. He says, "Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward." And then it says, "But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly." So, in other words, like, when you're doing something, don't be like boastful about it. Don't try and do something so you can seek the appraisal of men. Don't try and do it so you can look good in other men's eyes. That's not the goal. Do something for the sake of pleasing God. Like, do something and make it so that the mentality that you have is, I'm doing this to please God rather than doing it so that I can look good in front of other people, which I think is actually a really, really good lesson. Or in other words, be humble. If we could summarize it into like 2 words, I'd say be humble. And this is really interesting because personally, in my own life, I actually have this interesting story where I realized I have to be humble, otherwise this is not going to work out for me. So for those who don't know, I love music. That's my main thing. I'm actually a musician by trade, I guess you could say that. I'm a musician.
Okay.
I play piano.
Well,
when I was growing up and learning piano, one of the things that I used to do was go to Eisteddfods, which are kind of like, they're like performance / competition sort of things, okay, for music and for like different things, for dancing and for ballet and that kind of stuff. But especially for music, that's where I'd go.
How is it called again?
Eisteddfods. It's a funny spelling. It's like EISTODDFOD, Eisteddfod. Anyway, so I'd go to these Eisteddfods. There was one in Tari that I used to go to, which is actually a really great Eisteddfod. But when I went to these Eisteddfods, I would go there with the mentality.
This is such a funny word, man.
Yeah.
Eisteddfod.
Yeah.
Where are you going today? I'm just going to a Eisteddfod.
Yep.
Just like looking at your
Going to an Eisteddfod.
All right.
So one of the
Eisteddfod.
things was I would go to these Eisteddfods and I had the mentality that I was better than everyone else. I'm like the best piano player here. I'm the best piano player here I'm the best piano player
in the region, in the competition.
Yeah, in the region, in the competition. I'm the best piano player here. And so what happened was I would go into these Eisteddfods thinking I'm better than everyone else, not being humble at all, being like, I'm great at this. I'm going to win first prize every time. And actually what's interesting is more often than not, I would. Why, though, was I having this mentality of I'm better than everyone, I don't really care, this is too easy, this is like, whatever, I'm going to win this thing, is actually because I was very, very nervous. So I was nervous to play in front of these people, and as like a coping mechanism, I would like trick myself into having the attitude of, I don't care, this is too easy.
Wait, did you ended up winning all of these Stedfords?
Most often I would come first, yeah.
So
I would win.
You would say that your attitude kind of helped you out?
Yeah, in some way. And this is why it helped me. I'll tell you why. Because most often when you do a performance, when you're doing a Stedford or whatever, you get nervous. And when you get nervous, that's when you make mistakes. Whereas if you're at home and you're practicing at home, there's no pressure, there's no stress. So you're far less likely to make mistakes. You can just go through things easy.
That's true.
And so I was like, well, I want to try and get myself into the least stressed out state possible. So I just tell myself, this thing is easy. This is easy peasy. Everyone here sucks in comparison to me. Like, I'm going to win this thing. This is a breeze. This is going to be easy, right? And that way it would calm me down so that I'd go out and actually play really well, which is kind of like a weird mental trick that I'd try and play on myself. Was it healthy? Probably not. I don't think it was healthy because it kind of bred within me this competitive nature of like, I have to beat these other people. And like the main goal here is to come first. That's what it kind of did. But this is where the story goes. So I was kind of not very humble when it came to performances and when it came to piano and music. I was kind of always had this mentality of I'm the best. Well, it just so happened I got asked to play at a concert. And this concert was in Newcastle, actually, at the Adamstown Uniting Church. There's this thing called the Twilight Musical Dialogues. It was run by this lady named Sally Walker, who is one of the lecturers at the Australian National University School of Music. So she's quite well known within the classical music sphere in Australia. Mm-hmm. The other people that were there was the head of the School of Music at ANU at the time. His name is Kim Cuneo. He was there in this concert, in this performance. So he's another like big name.
Are they like as organizers or as competitors?
This is a performance. It's actually a concert. It's not a Stedford, so this is no longer a competition. This is just a performance. But they were very high up. They were far better musicians than I was. Okay. So I was very much out of my league. There was a lady here. Her name is Miriam Allen. She lives, I don't know if she still lives, but she at the time was living in Buckingham Palace as a soprano singer. So like classical singing. She was that good that she was over in the UK living in Buckingham Palace. So I'm so far out of my depth as far as, like my musical level.
So it's kind of like the Bible times where the kings are saying, bring me the musicians, I'm bored.
Yeah.
And they'll get like these world-class singers and performers that just live on the palace. Say, go some live music to you.
And so what was happening here was I was in this situation where I was like, man, I am so far out of my depth. And then I was getting stressed. I was starting to worry. And what I'd always do with performances, before I'd actually get up and play the piano, play this performance, I would imagine playing it in my head. So I'd run through the piece in my head. So I'm like, I remember everything. I remember where everything goes. I remember all the notes. Okay, cool. But what would often happen is when I'm trying to remember the song in my head, in this moment of heightened stress, I would come to a spot that I forgot.
Yeah.
And I'd go, oh no, I've forgotten what I'm supposed to play next. And so when I'd go up on the stage, I'm worried. All I'm thinking about is what is supposed to come next. And either it was the case that my muscle memory would kick in and I'd thankfully get over that hurdle, or I'd come to it and I'd be stuck. I'd make a mistake. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. Anyway, I'm sitting here waiting to go up to do my performance because I'm this young, like budding new musician. That's kind of how they put me out in this concert. I'm this young budding new musician sitting here stressing out, worrying like, oh my goodness, this is a big audience.
One thing is for you to be a young budding new musician and you're one among 30 violins. The other thing is like you are one among one piano.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like pressure is up.
And the only thing when I'm playing, the only instrument that's playing is me. I'm the only one playing. I'm doing a solo piano performance, right? So if I make a mistake, it's very, very obvious. Anyway, here I am sitting, waiting to go up, and I'm running through this song in my mind. I'm thinking, what is it? What is it? I'm playing through this. Okay, I know what's going on. I know these songs. And sure enough, there comes a spot in the music where I forget what is supposed to come next. I don't know. And I remember at that moment, I was like, I am so stuffed. Like if I don't pull this off, this is going to look terrible. So what do? I just came straight to God. I was like, Lord, I'm going to leave this in your hands. This is your concert. This is your music. This is a moment for me to glorify you. I'm humbling myself. I am in your hands, Lord, because I don't know what to do here. Like I've forgotten this is intense.
That was mid-music?
No. This is before I go up to play.
While you're practicing in your mind.
Yeah, while I'm practicing in my mind before I go up to play. And I say that prayer in my mind. I go, you know, I'm going to pray and I'm going to ask God, please help me to play. Let me glorify you. And this is in your hands now. Whatever you want it to be, whether it's good music, whether I stuff up, whatever, I leave it in your hands. I trust you. And then I go up and play. And I kid you not, the first time I'd never made a single mistake was that performance. Get up there, make zero mistakes. It was like and I thought I played okay. I was like, this is okay. I probably could have done a little bit better. But I truly believe God actually made everyone in the audience hear something better than what I played, that he might be glorified. And everyone afterwards was like, that was amazing, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, praise God, because it wasn't me. And the point that I want to make of this, and we'll continue doing more on this Bible study, but the point I want to make is that even in times where we might be, you know, boastful or whatever, like I was, we might get into a situation where, okay, we're humbled very quickly, like I was. And prayer is going to be one of the most powerful things that'll fix that situation, that'll solve that problem that we have.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
Got a message from Wayne saying, blessings. Put Pastor Ben on every Tuesday, please. It's a great testimony.
That's actually a pretty good idea.
Really definitely going to pass on that feedback for you, Wayne. And we're going to back here because you were playing this like big deal concert, and you could tell that your boasting about it wouldn't do you any good. It was not going to help you.
Yeah.
And instead you decided to humble yourself and pray.
Yeah, I realized in the moment, I was like, if I'm going to try and be boastful, if I'm going to try and think that I'm better than these other musicians here, it's not going to work. It's not good because it's simply not true. That was the reality of the situation. It just simply was not true. Everyone that was there was actually far better than I was at music. They practiced for much longer. Everyone was older than I was, so they had more experience. Like I was out of my depth fully in this situation. I was out of my depth. And so that's why I realized, I was like, I cannot try and be boastful here and think that I will, in my own strength, be able to get through this kind of thing. Because I realized very quickly when I was sitting, waiting to get up to play this piece, I've forgotten how the piece goes. At one point, there was this particular passage in the piece that I was like, I cannot remember what I'm supposed to play here. And in that moment, I was like, I know for a fact that if I got up now and tried to play this piece, I'm going to stuff it up. I'm going to make a mistake there, and it's probably going to be quite the catastrophe. Like, it wouldn't be a small mistake. It'd be probably a big one. So do you still
do that? Like, every time that you go out to pray, do you ask God to help you? Or
Absolutely.
do you trust in your training?
Absolutely. No, every single time. And it's so interesting because from that point onwards, I was like, well, if God is the one who made music, he's the creator of all things. He's also the creator of music. And if I want to play something that will glorify him, why not ask him to help me, Because ultimately it is his thing. And it's like, in that way, it's like I'm returning back the gift that God has given me with music. I'm kind of giving it back to him. Like returning it back to him by asking him, Lord, please help me when I'm playing. Please help me. Like perfect example. After this, now this is what was so fascinating about this whole concert and such an awesome thing was since the head of the School of Music at ANU in Canberra, since he was there and he heard me play, after that concert, he said, yeah, if you want to come study at ANU, you're more than welcome.
Yeah,
it's pretty much like, he's like, we don't even have to
apply.
Like pretty much, he's kind of like if you apply and I see your name, I'll let you in. And I was like, this is incredible. Like,
wow.
So, and then it was a decision for me. Should I study music at Sydney? Should I study music in Canberra? And I was like, well, it's really seeming like God has led me to go to Canberra.
Nice.
There's a lot of things that lined up, and I was like, this is awesome. So I ended up, going to study music in Canberra. And what was so awesome about that was while I was studying music, every time I had a performance, every time I had an assessment that required me to play music, I would always pray beforehand. I'd always pray silently. I'd say, Lord, please be with me now as I pray, as I play music, and may you be glorified through it. May everyone gain a blessing from hearing this. May it turn them to you. And I seriously believe that God blessed the music that I played because of it. So in those moments, like before, when I used to rely on my own strength, I used to be, kind of arrogant, boastful and proud, and I wasn't humble at all. And I would still make mistakes, and it also got me into this mentality of like competition, got me into a mentality of like everyone's beneath me kind of thing. God brought me out of that by putting me in that situation where I was no longer able to rely on my own strength. And it's funny because we actually see a similar thing happen to Samson, where he disregards God. Delilah comes and asks him for where the source of his strength is, and he just eventually tells her, it's my hair. She chops it off, and he gets caught by the Philistines. But in the very end, because we actually didn't touch on this, the very end of the story of Samson is that he prays a final prayer. And he's like, Lord, remember me just this once, that I might bring vengeance on the Philistines, that I might take revenge on the Philistines. Like, just this once. I know I've disobeyed you, but remember me just this once, that you might be glorified, and that I might do what you had planned for me to do initially, which was to free Israel from the Philistines, and in that moment, God gives him back strength so that he can collapse the massive temple that all the Philistines are in. And it's the same, I think, same situation happened to me where I was in this concert where I was like, Lord, I am aware, I'm fully aware that I am out of my depth, I'm out of my own capabilities. My only option here is to trust and rely on you. So please be with me. And from then I learned that is the best way, full stop, that is the best way to live, is by trusting and relying in God's strength rather than trying to rely on our own. Like, we will always, I can almost guarantee that if you rely on your own strength, you will at some point fall.
Yeah,
you'll at some point fail.
100%.
But God never fails. That's the thing. God never fails. God is always faithful to his promises. God is infinitely strong. So
that's the first, you reckon, big stronghold is relying on your own strength?
That's one of them. Absolutely. I think relying on our own strength and taking things into our own control, trying to control it for ourselves, that's a huge one. I think a lot of people would find that, they would do that in their own lives because naturally we want to try and control things. Naturally we want to think that we're able and capable of doing things. But what's interesting is when we read the Bible, we learn actually the best course of action, the best thing we can do is to trust in God, to lean on him, to rely on his strength rather than our own, because he will be able to accomplish that which we can't, The other thing that is interesting, let's go here because this is really fascinating. Luke chapter 18 and verse 10 to 14. It's still kind of on this topic of boasting, but Jesus talks here about two types of people who go and pray to God, and it's a really interesting passage. So Luke chapter 18, verse 10 to 14. Do you reckon you could read that for us,
sure.
Skafy?
2 men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and was praying this to himself: God, I thank you that I am not like other people, swindlers, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I pay tithes of all that I get. But a tax collector, standing some distance away, was even unwilling to lift up his eyes to heaven, but was beating his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, the sinner. I tell you, This man went to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but he who humbles himself will be exalted.
Yeah. So that's like such a fascinating and insightful passage, I reckon, where Jesus is talking here. He's like,
when we want to talk to God, we want to humble ourselves, not exalt ourselves.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, like what the Pharisee, when he's praying, it's interesting, like when you read it, he says, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust and adulterers, or even as this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I possess. But the tax collector said, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Like when you look at the Pharisee, you realize he's a very selfish guy, like thinks highly of himself, thinks that he's better than everyone else.
Yeah, 100%.
But the tax collector realizes that his actual character, his actual nature is that he is a sinner.
And this is the thing. He's like the Pharisee is comparing himself with whom? With swindlers, unjust, adulterers. Like he has a bit of a low bar as well. It's like, look at all these other people. It's just like you, a piano professional. You go to kindergarten and you're comparing yourself. Look, I'm much better than all of these kids.
Yeah,
they barely know how to tie their shoes, let alone, it's just like, man, like what's the purpose?
That's true.
So he's comparing, number one, and every time that we compare ourselves, particularly like I love when people say this, I'm a good person. And like my brain automatically thinks, okay, good compared to whom? To the swindlers, tax collectors, criminals, and so on, or compared to Jesus Christ himself? Because that's what we should be comparing. And when we compare ourselves to God, guess what? God is so much superior to us in every single way that the only thing we can do if we are honest is just do like the tax collector, look down and says, God, just have mercy on me, a swindler.
Yeah.
This tax collector might have been a very decent tax collector, which I actually think he might have been. He's going to the temple to pray to God. But when, because there were such a thing as honest tax collectors. Tax collectors were not automatically traitors of the nation.
Yeah.
So much so, and this is what people don't realize, because tax collectors get a real bad rep in the Bible, and they got a really bad rep among the Jews, because the way that the Roman taxation system worked is this: like the Romans will come to the tax collector and say, "Look, this is like the minimum that we need for you to collect in taxes.
Right.
Anything above that, it's your cut."
Okay, that's interesting.
So a lot of tax collectors would use that to their advantage to charge people exorbitant amounts and to enrich themselves by oppressing their fellow Jews. And often they will bribe or they will threaten them and all these kinds of things, because now they have the whole Roman apparatus behind them. But when John the Baptist, for example, was baptizing people and preaching and doing his thing, some tax collectors came to him. And they said, what should we do to repent and to show fruits of repentance? You know what John the Baptist said to them?
What did he say?
He didn't say, stop being a tax collector.
Yeah.
Just says, just take what is fair.
Interesting.
So you could be a fair, legitimate tax collector. But even if that was the case in that story, he was still looking at himself and looking, God, like, I'm a sinner.
Yeah.
And this is the last, like, whenever we're coming to God, instead of trying to impress God of how good we are, actually, we're deceiving ourselves. So when you come to God, says, God, look, just have mercy on me.
Yeah.
I'm a sinner. That's the right attitude to go and talk to God.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting, like there's other examples. In fact, we'll go there. We'll look at them briefly, and we might look at them tomorrow as well. But in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus gives examples, because this is part of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, where he's talking about all these things, where he's like, you've heard it said this, but I say to you something else. And it's really fascinating. So if we go there, Matthew chapter 5, and we can look at actually verse 20. Let's go from verse 21.
Okay. You have heard that the ancients were told, you shall not commit murder, and whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. And whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing, shall be guilty before the Supreme Court, and whoever says, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell. Therefore, if you are presenting your offering at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering. Just leave your offering there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother and then come and present your offering.
Okay, let's pause there. So basically what Jesus is saying here is he's like, okay, you've heard it said, don't murder, because if you murder, you're going to be judged according to the system, like the judicial system, right? But then he goes, but I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause, if you're, annoyed at someone without a cause, you're in the same position. You're actually in the same position in the eyes of God. You'll be in danger of judgment, is what it says. And I was like, well, how can that be? If you think about it, why is it that, is Jesus just setting like a new standard to the law? Because the Bible says, don't murder, you shall not murder. But now he's saying, hang on, if I'm angry with my brother for no reason, that's in the same category? Like, that seems kind of crazy, doesn't it? The thing that I think Jesus is getting at here is that the end result, the very end result of this issue is murder. Murder is the end result, but that's not actually the root cause. The root cause is what he's pointing out here, like unnecessary aggression towards someone else. That's like the root problem. And if you let that fester and keep growing, the end result will be something like murder. But Jesus wants to address the root causes of our problems. He's not someone that's trying to address the symptoms, but he's actually trying to fix the main root cause of our issue, which is sin. Sin's the main problem. That's the root of all our problems is sin, right? Yeah. And Jesus wants to fix the very root of our problem. And so he's highlighting here that actually when the Ten Commandments, we see them, it says for us not to do these things, but the reality is that those things start from a very small place. They start as a very small seed. And Jesus wants to remove it, to free us of those kind of things. And so he's illustrating actually where all this aggression, where murder may happen, begins from aggression to your brother, begins from those kind of things. So when we see that, like Jesus he goes on and says, like, if you've heard it said of those, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And so what Jesus is pointing out here is
going right at the core of the matter.
Yeah, exactly. The very core, the very root cause is what Jesus is actually highlighting. He's not saying, let's not address the symptom, let's address the very root cause here. Yeah. And I think that's so interesting.
He raises the standard so much.
Absolutely.
Too, doesn't he?
It raises the standard, but the reality is that was always the standard. That was actually always the standard. It's just that over time we kind of diluted it and lowered the standard ourselves. And so,
because this is very true, because when you look at the 10 Commandments, it says that thou shalt not commit adultery.
Yeah.
But in the very 10 Commandments, the last one is the most all-encompassing one. It's like, thou shalt not covet.
Yeah. And
all that Jesus is saying here, you're coveting things. So he's just like helping them to really interpret what the commandments mean. Because if you're calling someone a fool or a good for nothing, what are you coveting? You're coveting, either their death or their destruction, or that they are going to, something bad will happen to them, or you're coveting that they are going to learn their lesson somehow.
Absolutely.
But you're coveting basically that they are going to be punished in some way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Bible says don't covet. What you should covet is, not covet, what you should desire is, God, please deal with that person however you think you see fit.
And we see that Jesus takes this kind of stuff very seriously as well, because when we continue reading from verse 29, he says, if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you, for it's more profitable for you that one of your members perish than your whole body be cast into hell. Or he says, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. Now, does he literally mean, okay, if you've looked at a woman lustfully, you now have to pluck your eyes out so you're blind? Is that what Jesus is saying?
Okay, I will interpret that as a metaphor.
I will interpret it as a metaphor as well. But what Jesus is saying here is that the problem is so severe, just like if I had a gangrenous limb, right? Let's say my left hand it's got sepsis or something. It's gangrenous. And if I leave it on my hand, if I leave my hand on my body, I will die. That's the end result. I will die because it'll affect my whole body and I'm going to end up dying. The only solution to this problem is if I chop my hand off. Yeah. That's the only way I can be saved, because if I don't chop it off, I'm going to die. So that the only solution here to this problem, before it infects the rest of my body, is we've got to amputate it.
Yeah, I think that Jesus wants us to say here, like, hey, go to whatever extreme limits you need to go, but just make sure that do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
So that you're not you're not allowing your mind to be infected.
Absolutely.
With thoughts that will become actions. Those actions will become habits. These habits will become your character. Your character will end up becoming your eternal destiny.
Yeah, absolutely.
So whatever you need to do, just take it very seriously.
Yeah, like it's spiritually, it is better for you to cut, like to pluck out your eyes. It's better for you to gouge your eyes out. It's better for you to cut off your hand. Like, stop yourself from doing whatever it is. Do whatever it takes so that you don't end up in this situation.
That is really saying, like, the war that I think Jesus wants us to wage is a war against ourselves.
Yeah.
A war against our lusts, a war against the sin in us. And in a war, like, you're employing every measure. That's the good war. That's the good fight that the Apostle Paul talks about. It's really, is there a sin there that's separating you from God? Yeah. You know what? Do whatever it takes that it will, you get rid of it.
And I love right at the end.
And then don't give up fighting.
Absolutely. And right at the end of Matthew 5, Jesus says, "You've heard it said that you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven, for he makes his sun shine and rise on the evil and on the good, sends rain on the just and the unjust." And I love it because that's actually the solution to all of these problems. Because what sin is it's a separation, or it's going against God's law of love. So it's the opposite of love, which means that to fix that problem of sin, what do we need? Love. Love is actually the fix, and that comes from God. So when Jesus is like, I love your enemies, do all this, basically he's saying, come to me, be with me, abide in me, and I will be able to fix these problems in you. I will give you the love that you need to be able to fix all of this stuff, which I think is just so powerful.
Amazing. We're not on our own.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
And I get into the answer now to the quiz question. So I'd like to ask Tish to reveal to us how many times a day Daniel used to pray.
Yeah, quiz question is to do with prayer as well. It was 3 times that he was accustomed to pray.
3 times.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
Praying 3 times a day.
Does that mean he was just saying grace 3 times a day, or was he?
I had some people come in saying, "Pastor, I pray 3 times a day, just like Daniel. I pray before I eat lunch and breakfast and dinner."
Yeah.
Look, I don't think that was the prayer of Daniel. When you look at the prayers of Daniel that he left behind, like these are proper prayers. Like, he's actually taking the time to humble himself, to humble his nation, to take responsibility. Daniel is one of these guys in the Bible. I think the only person other than Jesus that never had any sin attributed to him. Not that he was sinless.
Yeah.
He was not. I'm sure he's just a human being just like everybody else.
Yeah, there's never stories of Daniel doing the wrong thing.
No, even with Joseph, because some people say, "Hey, what about Joseph?" Well, I mean, Joseph is a great character in the Bible, but he was a bit of a brat. And he didn't have a lot of wisdom. You know, he was really rubbing on the face of his brethren, like, "Oh, look how good I am!
Definitely,
look how much God is going to."
Yeah,
you know, there's an issue of humility there that needed to be addressed, which was addressed.
Yeah. That's true. Like, he wasn't very tactful when it came to telling his brothers, "I had a dream that you guys were all going to be bowing down to me one day. You
Yeah.
know? It wasn't very tactful.
No. And then when the brother said to him that, he went away and said, hey, by the way, I had another dream. And this time, not only you were bowing down to me, but even mom and dad.
Yeah.
It's like, just saying, don't know if how's going to come true or not, but hey, there's a good reason why dad is giving me the coat of multicolors. I mean, you should all be serving me. Even dad and mom should be serving me.
True.
He didn't know. So that was that. And so, yeah, Daniel's prayers were real prayers. Jeremiah the prophet said, look, when you're coming towards the end of the 70 years, you should be praying to God that he will do his will. And this is what Daniel was doing. Morning, afternoon, and evening, he was there. He was praying, and he was praying the prayer. He was really humbling himself and reminding God of his promises. Those prayers are incredible case studies on how to pray, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Particularly in Daniel chapter 9,
Yeah,
his prayer there.
We had a message here come through from Davo. He said, Skafy and Elliot, I heard a testimony of a pastor was, as guys, we are visual. So when you walking, you happen to have a woman come into your view, that can't be helped. The problem and sin is when you pass that woman, is you turn back and have a second look.
It's kind of like that meme. Have you seen that meme? The guy looking back and the girlfriend looking at him and just like...
It's true. Yeah. Then he says...
Looking back.
He said, the solution is don't do the second look. That worked for this pastor, and he got his wife to agree together with him that he wouldn't have the second look. So there you go. That worked for the pastor. I reckon...
Does it mean that the wife agreed that it was okay to have the first look and just not this?
I don't know. Depends how long the first look was for, I reckon. Because you could have one really long gawk.
That's right. You don't want to be staring, giving this stare.
Yeah. It's true. I think, we just need to be aware, okay, this is a thing that exists, and this is something that God has made.
Yeah. And that's a great testimony, Dave. Look, I think there's definitely a lot of merit there. And different people found different ways, methods / avenues to deal with that, like the stare, the looking, the coveting in your mind. Martin Luther had an interesting way of saying it. He says, look, I cannot prevent a bird from flying over my head, but I surely can prevent it from building a nest in my hair.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. That's awesome.
So
that is awesome.
Yeah. So even myself, when if there's like an attractive lady that's going on and I have nothing to do with her, it's not that I'm talking to her, working or anything like that. Yeah. Because I've seen people going to the other extreme and they wouldn't look women in the eyes. Yeah. That was like very weird and made them even more uncomfortable. And look, he's trying to battle the sin in his heart.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's the solution either. What I found is that when I see that my brain is wanting to kind of keep looking, I just tell myself, no, I'm not going to be looking. And actually, this is going to be an offering to God. So God, I could be totally looking, but I'm not. And here you go. This is my offering to you.
Exactly.
You know what? And that helps me.
It's a perfect opportunity to pray. So as always, remember to talk faith, live faith, and act faith. You go strong in Christ.
God be with you till we meet again. God be with you till we meet again.
Thanks for being a part of the Faith FM family. Join our community on Facebook or get in touch at 1-800-FAITH-FM.